The desert heat pressed down like a weight as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera adjusted his grip on his rifle. The small village of Al-Qadir had been quiet for 3 days, too quiet for comfort. Intelligence suggested the area was clear, but Rivera's gut told him otherwise. He'd learned to trust that feeling during his 8 years with the Navy SEALs. "Movement, 2 o'clock," whispered Petty Officer Jake Sullivan through the comm. The team of 6 had been positioned around the village perimeter since dawn, watching for any signs of insurgent activity. What they found instead was something none of them expected. A woman emerged from behind a crumbling stone wall, moving with deliberate caution. She wore traditional civilian clothing, a dark hijab covering her hair, but something about her movement caught Rivera's attention. She didn't move like a frightened villager. Her steps were measured, purposeful, and her eyes constantly scanned the area with tactical awareness. "Civilian approaching the northeast checkpoint," Rivera reported to his team leader, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. "Single female, appears unarmed." The woman continued forward, seemingly unaware of the concealed SEAL positions. As she drew closer, Rivera noticed something that made his blood run cold. Dark stains covered the front of her clothing, and she was favoring her left side. Blood. Fresh blood. "She's wounded," he whispered into his microphone. "Requesting permission to approach." "Negative," came Chen's immediate response. "Hold position. Could be a trap." But as Rivera watched through his scope, the woman stumbled. Her hand pressed against her side, and he could see the pain etched across her face even from 50 meters away. She was hurt badly, and she was alone in hostile territory. The woman looked directly at Rivera's position. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance, and he saw something that shook him to his core. There was no fear in her gaze, only a calm determination that reminded him of his own reflection before dangerous missions. She raised her hand slowly, palm open, in a gesture of surrender. Then she spoke, and her words carried clearly across the silent desert air. "American soldiers," she called out in accented but clear English. "I need medical assistance. I have information about the missing convoy." Rivera's heart skipped. 3 days ago, a supply convoy had disappeared somewhere in this region. 7 Marines were missing, and the search had turned up nothing. If this woman had information about them, she could be their only lead. "Did you copy that?" Rivera asked over the comm. "Copy," Chen responded. "All units maintain overwatch. Rivera, Sullivan approach with extreme caution. Martinez, get ready with medical supplies." Hospital Corpsman, First Class. Elena Martinez had been with the team for 2 years. She was one of the best field medics Rivera had ever worked with, calm under pressure, and skilled enough to perform surgery in a foxhole if necessary. If anyone could help this mysterious woman, it was Martinez. Rivera and Sullivan moved forward in a tactical formation, weapons ready but not directly threatening. As they got closer, Rivera could see the woman's injuries more clearly. She had taken at least 2 rounds, one in the shoulder and another that had grazed her ribs. Despite the obvious pain, she stood straight and kept her hands visible. "Ma'am, we're here to help," Sullivan called out as they approached. "Can you understand English?" "Yes, I understand perfectly," she replied. Her accent was Middle Eastern, but her grammar was flawless. "My name is Aliyah Hassan. I was with the convoy when it was attacked." Rivera exchanged a quick glance with Sullivan. If she was telling the truth, she might be the first survivor they'd found. But something about her story didn't add up. The convoy had been carrying military supplies, not civilians. "Ma'am, we're going to need to search you for weapons," Rivera said gently. "Standard procedure. My corpsman is going to treat your wounds." Aliyah nodded and slowly raised her arms. Rivera performed a quick but thorough search while Sullivan kept watch. She was unarmed, but Rivera found something that made him pause. Tucked into her waistband was a small radio, military grade and definitely not standard civilian equipment. Martinez arrived with her medical kit and immediately went to work. As she cut away the bloodied fabric around Alia's wounds, she spoke in a calm, professional tone. "You've lost some blood, but the wounds aren't life-threatening if we treat them now," Martinez said. "The shoulder wound went straight through. The rib shot is just a graze, but it's going to hurt for a while." As Martinez worked, Alia remained remarkably calm. Most civilians would be shaking, crying, or at least showing signs of shock after being shot. Instead, she watched the surrounding area with the same tactical awareness Rivera had noticed earlier. "The convoy," Rivera said as Martinez bandaged the shoulder wound. "Tell us what happened." Alia's expression grew grim. "They were ambushed at the bridge crossing, about 5 kilometers north of here. I was traveling with them when the attack began. Most of the vehicles were destroyed, but some of the soldiers were taken alive." "You were traveling with a military convoy?" Sullivan asked. "Why?" For the first time, Alia hesitated. Rivera could see her weighing her words carefully. "I was providing translation services," she said finally. "The convoy was meeting with local tribal leaders about security arrangements." It was plausible, but Rivera's instincts were screaming that there was more to the story. Translators didn't usually carry military radios or move with the controlled precision of someone with combat training. Martinez finished wrapping the wounds and gave Alia a small dose of morphine for the pain. As the medication took effect, some of the tension left Alia's shoulders, but her alertness never wavered. "Can you take us to where the convoy was attacked?" Chen's voice came through Rivera's earpiece. The team leader had been monitoring the conversation from her position. Alia nodded. "Yes, but we should move quickly. The insurgents who attacked the convoy, they're still in the area. They're planning something bigger." "What kind of something bigger?" Rivera asked. "There's a weapons cache hidden in the village. They're planning to use it for an attack on the American base at Kandahar. The captured Marines, they're being held as leverage." Rivera felt his pulse quicken. If Alia was telling the truth, they were dealing with something much larger than a simple convoy ambush. But every answer she gave only raised more questions about who she really was. "Ma'am, I need to ask you directly," Rivera said, looking into her eyes. "Who are you really? Because you don't move like a translator, and you're carrying military equipment." For a long moment, Alia stared back at him. Rivera could see her making a decision, weighing risks he couldn't imagine. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not just a translator." Before she could say more, the sharp crack of a sniper rifle echoed across the desert. Dust kicked up inches from Rivera's feet, and all 3 soldiers immediately dropped to the ground, pulling Alia down with them. "Contact! Sniper! Northwest!" Sullivan shouted into his radio. More shots followed, and Rivera could hear the distinctive whistle of rounds passing overhead. They were pinned down in the open, with minimal cover and an injured civilian to protect. "Martinez, get her to that rock outcrop," Rivera ordered, pointing to a cluster of boulders 30 meters away. "Sullivan, lay down, suppressing fire." As his teammates moved, Rivera scanned the area where the shots were coming from. Through his scope, he caught a glimpse of movement on a distant rooftop. The sniper was good, probably using the same kind of advanced optics as the SEALs themselves. "I count at least 3 shooters," Chen's voice crackled through the radio. "Multiple positions. This is a coordinated ambush." Rivera's mind raced. The timing was too convenient. They'd been in position for hours without incident, but within minutes of making contact with Alia, they were under attack. Either it was an incredible coincidence, or someone had been watching and waiting. As they reached the relative safety of the rocks, Martinez checked Alia's wounds. The sudden movement had reopened the shoulder injury, and blood was seeping through the fresh bandages. "I'm fine," Alia insisted, though her face was pale with pain and blood loss. "But you need to know something. The attack on your convoy, It wasn't random. Someone gave the insurgents detailed intelligence about the route, the timing, everything. "You're saying there's a leak?" Rivera asked. "More than a leak. There's someone working with the insurgents who has access to high-level intelligence. Someone who knew about this mission." Another burst of gunfire forced them to duck lower behind the rocks. Rivera could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions now. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the enemy seemed to know exactly where they were. "Chen, we need immediate extraction," Rivera called over the radio. "Our position is compromised." "Working on it," came the reply. "Air support is 20 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" 20 minutes felt like an eternity under fire, especially with a wounded civilian who might hold the key to finding 7 missing Marines. But as Rivera looked at Aaliyah, crouched behind the rocks with blood on her clothes and determination in her eyes, he realized that she might be much more than just a key to finding the missing soldiers. She might be the most important asset they'd ever encountered in this desert war. The gunfire intensified, and Rivera knew that whatever secrets Aaliyah was hiding would have to wait. First, they had to survive the next 20 minutes. But something told him that once they got through this firefight, nothing would be the same. The woman who claimed to be just a translator was about to change everything they thought they knew about their mission, their enemy, and the war itself. The firefight raged for 18 minutes before the distinctive sound of Apache helicopters cut through the desert air. Rivera had never been so happy to hear rotor blades in his life. During those 18 minutes, Aaliyah had surprised him more than once. When Martinez had been forced to reload behind cover, Aaliyah had calmly taken over applying pressure to a shrapnel wound Sullivan had sustained. Her field medicine skills were impressive, too impressive for a civilian translator. When a grenade had landed near their position, she'd identified it by sound alone and shouted a warning that saved Martinez's life. "Those are American birds," Aaliyah said with obvious relief as the helicopters appeared over the ridge. "Your air support has excellent timing." The Apache gunships made quick work of the enemy positions. Within minutes, the hostile fire had stopped completely, and the desert returned to its eerie silence. But Rivera knew this was just the beginning of a much larger mystery. The extraction helicopter set down 50 meters away, kicking up a cloud of sand that forced everyone to shield their eyes. As they helped Aaliyah toward the aircraft, she leaned close to Rivera and spoke in a voice barely audible over the rotor noise. "When we get to base, ask to speak with Colonel Morrison. Tell him Nightingale is requesting immediate debriefing. He'll understand." Rivera stared at her in shock. Nightingale was a code name he'd heard whispered in classified briefings. It belonged to one of the most valuable intelligence assets in the region, someone so deep undercover that even most SEAL teams didn't know their real identity. During the flight back to Forward Operating Base Echo, Rivera couldn't stop watching Aaliyah. She sat quietly, her wounds professionally bandaged by the helicopter's flight medic, but her eyes constantly monitored their surroundings. She was mapping their route, noting landmarks, observing their procedures. These weren't the actions of a rescued civilian. Lieutenant Commander Chen sat across from them, studying Aaliyah with professional curiosity. Rivera could see his team leader putting pieces together, just as he was. The radio, the tactical awareness, the field medicine skills, and now the mention of a highly classified code name. Everything pointed to one impossible conclusion. When they landed at the base, Aaliyah was immediately taken to the medical facility for proper treatment, but before the medics could whisk her away, she caught Rivera's arm. "Remember what I told you about Colonel Morrison?" she said urgently. "And Rivera? Thank you for trusting me out there." As she was taken away, Chen approached Rivera with a grim expression. "Report to debriefing in 1 hour," she said. "And Rivera? Not a word about what she said to you until we're in a secure room." The next hour passed slowly. Rivera cleaned his weapons, filed his initial report, and tried to process what had happened. The missing convoy, the perfectly timed ambush, and most importantly, the mysterious woman who seemed to know far more than she was letting on. The debriefing room was sterile and windowless, designed to prevent any possible surveillance. Present were Chen, Rivera, Colonel Morrison himself, and a man in civilian clothes who introduced himself only as Agent Carter from an unspecified intelligence agency. "Before we begin," Rivera said, "the woman, Aliyah Hassan, asked me to tell Colonel Morrison that Nightingale is requesting immediate debriefing." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Colonel Morrison's face went pale, and Agent Carter sat up sharply in his chair. "Jesus Christ," Morrison whispered. "Are you absolutely certain those were her exact words?" "Yes, sir." Morrison and Carter exchanged a look that spoke volumes. After a moment, Morrison turned back to Rivera. "Staff Sergeant, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Nightingale is one of our most valuable intelligence assets. She's been working undercover for 3 years, providing critical intelligence about insurgent operations throughout the region." Rivera felt his world shift. "She's one of ours?" "More than that," Carter interjected. "She's former military intelligence, recruited specifically for this operation. Her real name is Captain Sarah Al-Rashid, U.S. Army. She was born in Detroit to Iraqi immigrant parents, speaks 4 languages fluently, and has a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies from Georgetown." "Why didn't you tell us?" Chen asked. "If we'd known we were dealing with friendly assets." "Because her cover is so deep that even we lose track of her sometimes," Morrison replied. "She operates with complete autonomy, reporting only when she has critical intelligence. The last we heard from her was 6 weeks ago." Agent Carter opened a file and slid a photograph across the table. It showed a woman in army dress uniform, clearly the same person they'd rescued, but the transformation was remarkable. The confident military bearing was the same, but everything else about her appearance had been carefully altered. "She volunteered for this assignment knowing she might have to maintain her cover for years," Carter explained. "She's provided intelligence that has saved hundreds of American lives. The convoy attack 3 days ago, she was trying to prevent it." Rivera's mind raced back to the firefight. "She said someone with high-level access provided intelligence to the insurgents about the convoy route." "That's why she broke cover," Morrison said grimly. "She discovered there's a mole somewhere in our intelligence chain. Someone with access to classified mission details has been feeding information to the enemy." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If there was a mole with high-level access, it explained how the insurgents always seemed to be one step ahead. It also meant that Captain Al-Rashid had risked 3 years of deep cover work to warn them about it. "Where is she now?" Chen asked. "Medical facility," Morrison replied. "But we need to be extremely careful. If there is a mole, and if they discover that Nightingale has been compromised, her life is in immediate danger." Agent Carter leaned forward. "We're going to need detailed debriefs from all of you about exactly what happened out there. Every detail could be important." Over the next 2 hours, Rivera and his team provided exhaustive accounts of their encounter with Captain Al-Rashid. Every word she'd spoken, every gesture, every tactical decision was analyzed and recorded. As they spoke, a clearer picture emerged. The convoy attack had been a trap, designed to draw out American response teams. The insurgents had known exactly when and where to strike because someone had given them detailed intelligence about the mission. "She saved our lives out there," Sullivan said during his debrief. "When that grenade landed, she reacted faster than any of us. That's not luck or instinct, that's training." Martinez nodded in agreement. Her field medicine skills were exceptional. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she never panicked, not once. When the debriefing concluded, Morrison addressed the team directly. "What you've learned here today cannot leave this room. As far as anyone else knows, you rescued a civilian translator who provided some information about the missing convoy. Captain al-Rashid's cover must be maintained at all costs. What about the missing Marines? Rivera asked. She provided coordinates before she was taken to medical, Carter replied. A rescue team is being assembled now, but we're going in dark, with minimal communications, because we can't trust our normal channels until we identify the mole. As the team prepared to leave, Morrison pulled Rivera aside. Staff Sergeant, I want you to know that your actions today likely saved one of our most important intelligence assets. Captain al-Rashid specifically mentioned your decision to trust her despite the inconsistencies in her story. Rivera felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Sir, what happens to her now? Her cover's blown. We're working on that, Morrison said grimly. But first, we need to use the intelligence she's provided to rescue those Marines and identify the mole. Until then, she's in protective custody. That evening, Rivera found himself unable to sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. The woman he'd helped rescue wasn't just a civilian caught in crossfire. She was a fellow soldier who had sacrificed everything to protect American lives. He thought about the moment when their eyes had met across the desert. He'd seen determination there, but now he understood what that determination represented. Captain Sarah al-Rashid had spent 3 years living a lie, surrounded by enemies, never able to let her guard down or reveal her true identity. The next morning brought urgent news. The rescue mission to find the missing Marines had been successful. All 7 had been found alive, held captive in a compound exactly where Captain al-Rashid had said they would be. But the success came with troubling revelations. The insurgents were expecting us, Chen told Rivera as they reviewed the mission reports. They had evacuated most of their forces before we arrived. Someone tipped them off. The mole? Has to be, which means they know we're onto them. Rivera felt a chill of concern. If the mole knew they were being hunted, Captain al-Rashid was in even greater danger. Her intelligence had been too accurate, her knowledge too detailed. Anyone paying attention would realize she was more than just a lucky survivor. Later that day, Rivera received permission to visit the medical facility. He found Captain al-Rashid sitting up in bed, looking much healthier but clearly frustrated with her confinement. Staff Sergeant Rivera, she said with a genuine smile. I was hoping you'd come by. How are you feeling, Captain? She gestured to her bandaged shoulder. I've had worse. But I'm going crazy sitting in this bed when I should be helping track down the mole. About that, Rivera said, lowering his voice. The rescue mission was successful, but the insurgents had advance warning. The leak is still active. Captain al-Rashid's expression darkened. I was afraid of that. Marcus, I need you to get a message to Colonel Morrison. Tell him to look at the communications logs from the day before the convoy attack. Someone with access to operational planning has been making unauthorized communications. Can't you tell him yourself? Not directly. They're monitoring all my communications now for security reasons, but you have legitimate reasons to meet with him about mission reports. Rivera nodded, understanding the delicate situation. Captain al-Rashid had risked everything to provide this intelligence, and now she was trapped in protective custody while the mole remained free to cause more damage. As he prepared to leave, she caught his arm. Marcus, there's something else. The convoy attack, it was just the beginning. They're planning something much bigger, and the mole is helping them coordinate it. We're running out of time. Rivera felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The woman who had risked 3 years of her life working undercover was now depending on him to help complete her mission. The war had just become much more personal and much more dangerous. Rivera didn't waste time. Within an hour of leaving the medical facility, he was sitting across from Colonel Morrison in the secure communications room. The colonel's face grew increasingly grim as Rivera relayed Captain al-Rashid's message about the communications logs. Unauthorized communications, Morrison repeated, his fingers drumming against the table. That narrows it down significantly. Only 12 people had access to the convoy's operational details. Agent Carter, who had been monitoring communications traffic, looked up from his computer terminal. I've been analyzing the data patterns for the past week. There's something here, but it's subtle. Someone's been using encrypted messaging at unusual hours, always during shift changes when monitoring is lightest. Can you trace the source? Morrison asked. Working on it. But whoever this is, they're good. They're using routing protocols that make it look like routine administrative traffic. Rivera felt his phone buzz with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the message made his blood run cold. The woman you rescued isn't who you think she is. Meet me at Building 7 in 20 minutes if you want the truth about Nightingale. He showed the message to Morrison, who immediately called for security. This could be the mole trying to draw us out, or it could be legitimate intelligence. Either way, we need to be careful. I'll go, Rivera said. If it's a trap, I can handle it. If it's real intelligence, we need to know. Not alone, Morrison decided. Carter, coordinate with base security. I want Building 7 surrounded, but not obviously so. Rivera, you'll go in wired for sound and video. Building 7 was an old storage facility on the outskirts of the base, rarely used and poorly lit. As Rivera approached, every shadow seemed to hide potential threats. His earpiece crackled softly with updates from the security team positioned around the perimeter. Inside the building, a figure waited in the shadows. As Rivera's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he recognized Major David Kowalski, the base intelligence officer. Kowalski looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. Major Kowalski? You sent the message? Rivera, thank God you came. I didn't know who else to trust. Kowalski stepped into a pool of light from a broken skylight. His face was haggard, and his hands shook slightly. Everything about this Nightingale situation is wrong. What do you mean? The woman you rescued, Sarah al-Rashid? She's not who they say she is. I've been checking the records, and there are inconsistencies everywhere. Her service record, her training history, even her biometric data doesn't match properly. Rivera felt confused. Are you saying she's not Captain al-Rashid? I'm saying the real Captain Sarah al-Rashid died in a car accident in Germany 18 months ago. Whoever that woman is, she's been using a dead officer's identity. The revelation hit Rivera like a physical blow. That's impossible. She knew classified information, tactical procedures, field medicine, all of which could be learned by someone with the right training and access, Kowalski interrupted. Rivera, I think she's working for the other side. The convoy attack, the missing Marines, even our rescue mission today. What if it was all orchestrated? Rivera's mind raced. The woman's tactical awareness, her calm under fire, her extensive knowledge of American procedures. If Kowalski was right, they hadn't rescued an intelligence asset. They'd brought an enemy agent directly into their most secure facility. Why come to me with this? Rivera asked. Why not go directly to Morrison? Kowalski's expression grew more troubled. Because I don't know how high this conspiracy goes. Someone with very high clearance has been protecting her identity, making sure her records passed security checks. I think there's more than one mole, Rivera. I think this goes to the top of our command structure. Through his earpiece, Rivera heard Agent Carter's voice. Rivera, we're seeing multiple heat signatures approaching Building 7. Armed individuals, not our security team. Get out of there now. Rivera drew his weapon and motioned for Kowalski to stay low. Major, we need to move. We've got hostiles incoming. But as they started toward the exit, Kowalski grabbed Rivera's arm. Wait. There's something else. The attack that's being planned, the one your Nightingale warned about, I think it's happening tonight, and I think she's coordinating it from inside our medical facility. The building erupted in gunfire as armed insurgents breached the entrances. Rivera and Kowalski took cover behind old supply crates as bullets shattered the air around them. Through the chaos, Rivera could hear Morrison's voice on his radio. "All units. Building 7 is under attack. Suspects are attempting to extract Major Kowalski. Do not let them succeed." Extract Kowalski? Rivera looked at the major with new understanding. The pieces were falling into place, but not in the way he'd expected. "You're the mole," Rivera said, his weapon trained on Kowalski. "The story about Captain al-Rashid. You made it all up to throw suspicion off yourself." Kowalski's mask finally dropped. The nervous, confused expression was replaced by cold calculation. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Rivera. But you're too late. The attack is already in motion, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." The firefight intensified, but now Rivera understood that the attackers weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to rescue Kowalski and eliminate Rivera as a witness. He pressed himself against cover and activated his emergency beacon. "Morrison, this is Rivera. Kowalski is the mole. Repeat, Major David Kowalski is working with the insurgents. And if he's right about an attack tonight, we need to secure the base immediately." "Copy that. Security teams are moving to assist you now." Through the gunfire, Rivera could hear helicopters approaching. But Kowalski was already moving toward a breach in the building's rear wall where his extraction team was waiting. "This isn't over, Rivera," Kowalski shouted over the noise. "Your precious Captain al-Rashid has been feeding you intelligence that we wanted you to have. The rescue mission today, we allowed you to succeed because it served our purposes. The real attack is something you'll never see coming." Before Rivera could respond, smoke grenades exploded throughout the building. In the confusion of white fog and gunfire, Kowalski and his extraction team disappeared into the desert night. When base security finally secured the building, Rivera was alone among the settling smoke and empty shell casings. But Kowalski's words echoed in his mind. If Captain al-Rashid had been feeding them manipulated intelligence, everything they thought they knew about the insurgent threat could be wrong. Rivera raced back to the medical facility, but he was too late. Captain al-Rashid's room was empty, and the duty nurse reported that she had been discharged an hour earlier on orders from Colonel Morrison himself. But when Rivera called Morrison, the colonel was as confused as he was. "I never authorized her release. Someone used forged orders and my electronic signature." The truth became clear with horrible certainty. Both al-Rashid and Kowalski had been working together, playing all sides against each other. The convoy attack, the rescue mission, even Rivera's encounter with al-Rashid in the desert had all been carefully orchestrated. But as Rivera stood in the empty medical room, he noticed something that made him reconsider everything. Hidden behind the bed, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was a small piece of paper with handwritten text. "The real attack is on the ammunition depot. Trust no one except Rivera. S.A." His hands shaking, Rivera called Morrison immediately. "Sir, we need to evacuate the ammunition depot now. I think that's the real target." "Rivera, how can you be sure? After everything that's happened, because she left me a message. Captain al-Rashid, the real Captain al-Rashid. I think she's been playing a deeper game than any of us realized." 30 minutes later, as explosive charges detonated throughout the evacuated ammunition depot, Rivera watched from a safe distance with mixed emotions. The coordinated attack had been prevented. But dozens of questions remained unanswered. Colonel Morrison approached him as secondary explosions lit up the night sky. The demolition team found evidence that the charges had been planted over several days. Someone with inside access had been preparing this for weeks. Kowalski? Partly. But the sophistication suggests multiple actors. "Rivera, I owe you an explanation about Captain al-Rashid." Morrison handed him a classified file with a security clearance level Rivera had never seen before. Her real name is Captain Sarah al-Rashid, just as we told you. But what we didn't tell you is that she's been running a triple agent operation. She convinced the insurgents that she was working for them while actually feeding them false intelligence. Rivera felt his understanding of the situation shift once again. So when Kowalski said she was enemy, he was partly right? She had to make the insurgents believe she was working for them in order to maintain her cover and discover the extent of their network. The intelligence she provided about the convoy attack was real, but by the time she could warn us, events were already in motion. And tonight, the ammunition depot? Morrison smiled grimly. She discovered the real plot and found a way to warn us even after being extracted by Kowalski's people. She's still out there, still undercover, still protecting American lives. As Rivera watched the fires burn in the distance, he thought about the courage it took to live that kind of life. Captain Sarah al-Rashid had spent years surrounded by enemies, never able to trust anyone completely, always walking a razor's edge between maintaining her cover and protecting innocent lives. The woman he'd met in the desert, wounded but determined, had been exactly who she appeared to be, a soldier willing to sacrifice everything for her mission. And somewhere in the darkness of the desert night, she was still out there, still fighting a war that most people would never know existed. 3 months later, Rivera received a brief message through encrypted military channels. The network has been neutralized. Thank you for trusting your instincts. The Marines you helped rescue send their regards. Nightingale. He never saw Captain Sarah al-Rashid again, but he often thought about their brief encounter in the desert. In a war where it was often impossible to tell friend from foe, she had reminded him that sometimes the most unlikely allies could be the most valuable ones. The courage to remain silent while wounded, to maintain cover while bleeding, and to trust strangers with your life required a special kind of heroism. Captain al-Rashid had shown him what it meant to be a true warrior, fighting not just with weapons, but with intelligence, deception, and an unwavering commitment to protecting others. In the end, every SEAL had frozen not because they didn't recognize her as more than a civilian, but because they had recognized exactly what she was, a fellow warrior whose battlefield was more dangerous and complex than any they had ever known.